Things really started happening for me when I was a kid of about 6 years old or so, when my sister and we were sent by my mother to go get my brother for dinner. And I mean, we had other strange things that happened after this incident, but this was like the first I could recollect. My sister, she and I went up the stairs to go get my brother, we came close to his doorway when out of his room came a robotic toy clown. And, you know, being kids, we were really curious about it, so we went to take a closer look at it. And as we got closer to this thing, I don't know, it's just the most outright feeling of terror came over us both, where we just turned to run from this before we even reached it. And as we ran from this thing, it felt like this thing was literally draining energy from us, and we started moving in slow motion as we ran from this. My sister got past me somehow and started heading down the stairs, and as she was going down the stairs, I watched her lose consciousness and tumble down the stairs in slow motion. I was still at the top, and I actually lost consciousness at the top of the stairs, and I woke up still at the top of the stairs. My mother had picked up my sister at the bottom. It was like it never happened. We never spoke of it. We never saw this thing again. Not until 10 years later, all of a sudden, the memory came back to me. You know, I was like, turned to my sister, and I'm like, hey, do you remember when we were kids and we saw that toy clown, you know? And she looked at me with such terror, like, I thought that was a dream. Wasn't that a dream? And I'm like, look, we don't share the same dreams. I'm like, you go over there and draw what you saw, and I'll draw what I saw. We both drew the same thing. It was just my beginning into looking for answers.
I got into this to prove that UFOs didn't exist, and then I saw my first UFO, and there was no stopping me. I just had to find out why they were here. I saw my first UFO close over a country road near New London, Wisconsin. I had been to a UFO get-together and had driven home. It's just about 32 miles. For some reason or other, I turned down this really lonely country road, decided to go into the back way to the campground. As I turned the corner, there was a sign that said Bean City. We got up to that sign and passed it. And all of a sudden, a UFO came down, hovered over the center of the road. I was just so amazed and so awestruck that here I was wide awake, and I was seeing this UFO, and a stairway came down from the center to the bottom. It was hovering a few feet off the road, and an alien came down, and he said, come on. He didn't say anything, but he waved, come on, and I don't know if I want to do this. And so he went, like, okay, we're not going to take you against our will. And I got to thinking that, my goodness, I've been studying UFOs for a couple of years. If I don't go, I may never get this opportunity to do it again. So I decided that I would go with them. We took off in the ship, and they dropped us on the other side of New London on a road I didn't know where it was, so it took quite a while to search to find the road to come back.
One day I was walking through the mall and came across a book that was sitting in the window, and it had this strange face on it. And I can't say that it looked familiar to me or anything, but I just knew I had to buy this book. And it was Whitley Strieber's Communion book. I started hearing other stories of people that would say that when they were kids, they would be lured to the aliens by putting out a toy of some sort, you know. So this clown-like thing was something that probably, you know, drew our attention because we did step closer to play with it. This toy clown is nothing that we'd ever seen before or since, and it seemed to hover just barely off the ground. Did a 90-degree angle turn coming out of my brother's bedroom and came right towards us. Never seen it before, didn't have remote control back then, didn't know what to think of it.
And you haven't seen it since?
Haven't seen it since. Other people that have spoken of clowns, toy clowns and stuff like that being used as their lure to these beings. So that convinced me, having somebody else back up that this was real. You know, I couldn't discount it, I couldn't discredit it, and I often wonder if I would have kept pursuing this so adamantly had my sister not recalled the same thing. A lot of people who think, you know, it's your mind playing tricks on you, can't play tricks on two people at the exact same time. It'd be the same thing.
So I went inside the craft. The aliens that were there kind of looked like this. They had a black mask on the front. I could not see what their face looked like a motorcycle's helmet. They were thin, the arms were long, the legs were short. They had a silver suit. It was tied at the ankles and is also tied at the wrists. They allowed me to sit in the pilot seat, and I proceeded to make a mess of the craft. I mean, they let me drive it, and I was whoop-de-doop, and I got sick to my stomach, and that was the end of that. And they never asked me to drive again.
You are witness to what is essentially an overview of the UFO phenomenon in one particular American state, Wisconsin, the second most active, most reported area for such activity in the nation. Its current hotspot for such things is here, Dundee Mountain, actually just a big hill, and the surrounding Long Lake, Dundee area of southeastern Wisconsin, a somewhat dog-leg-shaped stretch between the cities of Sheboygan and Fond du Lac. The crowning event of the year is UFO Days, held at Benson's Hideaway on the northern end of the lake the third weekend of every July. It boasts a day-long conference of like-minded enthusiasts, followed by an evening of sky-watching in hopes of seeing a new, unexplainable phenomenon.
My family's been here since 1855. We lived at Long Lake. That was prior to the damming of the lake. In 1947, there was a crop circle with my mother's cousin's property on the Jersey Flats, what we call the Jersey Flats by New Prospect, Wisconsin. It was a big circle in the oats field. Some people in the area saw something, a ship-type thing, something of that nature. I heard those things when I was much younger.
I joined a UFO group because I had seen that large UFO downtown Milwaukee, and had seen a couple of UFOs before that. Everybody started talking about. I had poltergeist stuff happen. Like, I had that happen too. I have this feeling that someone's watching me. I have that feeling too. And I just found that I had a lot more in common with these people than I was at first comfortable with. And like, gosh, their alien experiences don't sound very positive. I wouldn't want something like that to happen to me. Actually, I found that I wasn't like the other people because when I did have memories of seeing aliens, I was always able to respond to them. So. And defend myself. So I was actually having a conflict of alien contact.
Eagle River in Wisconsin's North Woods is the site of this particular state's most famous encounter with alleged outer space aliens. And however odd it sounds, it held up to scrutiny by the United States Air Force, enough to leave it filed as unexplained. On April 18, 1961, Joe Simonton, a local plumber, auctioneer, neighborhood Santa Claus, and chicken farmer, was having a late breakfast at his home when he heard the sound of a jet engine coming to a stop. He stepped outside to find a flying saucer landing in his backyard. From off a platform on the 30-foot-wide craft stepped three slender and very human-looking aliens. He claimed they appeared Italian. All about 5 feet tall, wearing black knit uniforms, turtlenecks, and helmet-like caps. They were mute. One handed Simonton what appeared to be a thermos jug, apparently wanting water. He filled it and returned it. They allowed him a peek inside the craft, and he watched one of them cooking pancakes on some type of hot pad. The inside was dark, with 3 instrument panels, and was designed with what he called a wrought iron look. One alien, with the red trim on his trousers, offered him 3 of the pancakes, which he later claimed tasted like cardboard. And then with a salute, the hatch closed. The saucer rose about 20 feet and disappeared into the sky in a matter of seconds, the blast from its departure tossing the treetops about wildly. Simonton reported the story to a local judge who sent the remaining uneaten pancakes to a lab for analysis, which the lab failed to do for some time. When they finally were analyzed, they were discovered to be of a common grain, but of an unknown hybrid. Meanwhile, other people were reporting UFO sightings in the Eagle River, Rhinelander area, which sent the Air Force to investigate. Simonton never changed his story, and the Air Force found few holes in it. The story was taken unusually seriously by the Air Force at the time. However, Simonton was bitter about the way his tale was received by press and public alike. Years later, he admitted to having more extraterrestrial contacts, but never explained himself or reported anything because of the way his first contact had been received.
Bonnie and I met each other at a meeting for space and aliens. And then there was a course offered out at Fox Valley Technical College. We went to that. We found other people in the area that were interested in UFOs, and that led us to come to the conclusion that we were not being told the truth by the media, by the people at this other group. There were a whole group of sightings and experiences which were not covered.
In '65, when I was in Vietnam, on guard duty, I saw a light in the sky that did greater than right angles and never slowed up. I thought that was strange. That's what got me very interested in the UFO phenomenon.
Tired of the giggles that I get when people hear that I'm into aliens and they ask me questions like, did you have sex with them? No. Did you have an anal probe done? Like, no. And all they know about these days, it seems to be, are gray alien beings.
We have never had any negative abductions or experiences like it are reported so often in the news. We've gone to UFO conferences all across the country. One researcher said he had interviewed over 600 cases and never once did he find a case where a person had no fear, no sexual experimentation. The person needed hypnosis to recall it. I looked him right in the eye and I said, well, I've had experiences my whole life. I've never been abducted, and not a one of them have been fear-filled. And then there was fear in his face, and he stepped back. We have been told by the aliens that we are in contact with, they're here to spread hope. They're here to help us and encourage us to do the same.
Once there were some people walking across the plains who came upon a man sitting alone on the grass. He raised his hand as they approached. "I don't belong here. I fell from above," he told them as he stood. He was handsome, clean, and shining brightly. The people said he could stay with them, but he told them he could only do so if they carefully cleaned the place where he was to be. They did, so he stayed with them. Every sundown he stood apart and stared up at the sky. "Something will come down from up there, and I will return with it," he said. He claimed he was a sky runner, one who dashes above the clouds. He had found an opening in the clouds and couldn't stop running until he fell. He waited at every sunset many days, until one afternoon he told everyone, "Now it's coming." They all looked and saw nothing, until the Skyman's host, the one who kept and fed the stranger, spotted a bright star overhead and pointed it out. Then all the others watched as the star descended. 2 men grabbed onto it and pulled it down. They asked him to stay, but he said he must go. The Skyman stepped onto it, and the star rose up into the sky, disappearing from view. Ancient Chippewa legend.
Patterns are starting to show that UFO activity is most prevalent around state national forests or parks. What better way to hide a government facility, alien base, where you cannot go onto the property, build, or anything? It's protected. You cannot go out on this land out here without permission in the state park here to build. It's all done through proper channels. And if these people had any contact with that, it's very well possible.
Maps of where sightings have taken place during the mid-20th century have yielded a pattern that indicates 2 orbits of reference where most of the UFO activity occurs. This has not changed that much over the decades. Some have even tried to make correspondences between seismic activity and UFO sightings, in case there is a correlation relating the release of subterranean gases, such as a sudden methane release, and other types of volcanism that might have a visual effect on the atmosphere.
White Hawk was a great hunter who lived deep in the forest. One day he came upon a clearing that had a pathway worn into the shape of a ring. There were no footprints and no other path leading up to it. He decided to wait and see if something might come by that would indicate what created it. He began to hear music from the sky and saw a tiny object descending, which became ever bigger as it approached the ground. This tiny speck assumed the form of a large basket, and from it leapt 12 beautiful maidens when it landed. The maidens began dancing to the music inside the ring, striking a shining ball as they circled in a manner similar to striking a drum. Smitten by the maidens, especially the youngest, Whitehawk jumped from his hiding place to try to catch her. The maidens quickly returned to the basket, which ascended out of sight, leaving Whitehawk to return to his lodge in amazement and disappointment. Whitehawk had studied with the shamans and decided to change his form to that of an opossum to pursue the maidens again. But when he sprang on the celestial sisters the next day, they once again disappeared into the sky. Whitehawk found a tree stump near the dancer's ring that was infested with mice. He decided to change his form to that of a mouse, to be unnoticeable in the ring. When the sisters descended on the third day, they began beating in time to the music on the stump, thereby chasing the mice away. Whitehawk emerged in his human form in time to capture the youngest, as the others boarded their basket and flew off. He tried every way he could to please his captured bride, and she acquiesced to life in the forest. Soon the pair had a baby boy. She became homesick and yearned to return to her family in the sky, so she secretly built her own wicker basket and one day placed herself and her child inside of it in the center of the magic ring. She began singing a celestial song. Whitehawk arrived just in time to see his new family disappear above the clouds. The girl soon forgot about her earthly husband, once back in her old realm, but not her son, who longed to see his father as he grew older. The girl's father told her to return to Earth with their son and bring him back with them. Father also requested that Whitehawk should bring something of each one of the animals he hunts. Whitehawk, who had spent every sorrowful day at the magic circle since, was overjoyed to see his wife and son again. And so they gathered a token of the animals requested. After several days they all stepped into the basket together and ascended to the sky. At the great feast celebrating their return, Father asked everyone to take one of the animal tokens that Whitehawk had brought. All were instantly transformed into the animal whose token they picked, and they proceeded to run about the world as those beings. As Whitehawk, his wife and child, all picked white feathers of the hawk, they immediately became hawks and flew all over the world, where that species survives to this day. Northern Shawnee Folktale.
What are the chances that there is life, intelligent life, someplace else besides Earth? Peter Ward and Donald Brownlee mulled over that very issue. Since the only life we can observe is on Earth, for the time being we must assume that all life must be similarly based. Life on Earth is determined by the cycle of the carbon molecule. Carbon is nearly the only one that has the power to transfer atoms from molecule to molecule with enough ease as to allow for metabolism to happen. Metabolism is simply the means by which energy in some form is taken in and stored, and waste product or spent energy is removed, thereby allowing something to prosper and reproduce, that is, live. The most convenient way for carbon to do this is via water in some form. So the quest for life immediately becomes the quest for water and some sustaining nutrients, that is, heavy metals. Looking across the universe, there are many more places hostile to life than would comfortably support it. Ultimately, one would need a planet that's a terrarium, a rocky planet with an ample water supply situated in a star's habitable zone. That star would have to be stable, and the planet itself should not be subject to too many anomalies, crashing asteroids, too widely elliptical in orbit varying its temperature, big continents that pile up at the poles causing them too prolonged of an ice age, and so on. Hardy as it is, life must be nurtured and sustained properly in order for it to begin and grow. So what you end up looking for are other Earths, and how many are there in this galaxy, this universe? Although recent discoveries have shown there may be more planets and older planets in more curious places than originally thought, And learning about primitive bacteria in places like volcanic pools and hot vents on the bottom of oceans has changed people's opinions about how life could have begun. For instance, life does not necessarily need sunlight to get started. The need for a moderate terrarium-style planet remains the chief target to find life. And once life has begun, there's no guarantee it will develop its own space program. A huge percentage of living planets may have life that never evolves past the bacterial stage. Ward and Brownlee came up with an equation that computes how many estimated planets there are and how many can sustain life, even reaching the level of high-tech civilization. This doesn't rule out alien spaceships, but it does suggest life anywhere is exceedingly rare. Rarer still, the kind of life that can invent a spacecraft, and rarer still, that such life would be near enough to pop by for the occasional visit or abduction.
After moving back from California, when I was about 3 years old, till about the age of almost 9, that I lived here at this house. Poltergeist activities started in like 1978 and on Christmas Day actually. My future stepmother was moving in, and she moved in some of her stuff, and one thing was an organ. We had just opened up all our presents and everything, and actually my folks had left to go visit somebody else for Christmas time, and her organ started playing by itself while we're sitting there playing with our toys, and turned to my future stepbrother, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, it's just like in the movies, you know, with the stuff playing by itself, and like, how does it do that? And he's like, it doesn't. And we're like, we just looked at each other with terror, we're like, ah! We just totally tore out of there, and we locked ourselves in the bathroom. I got kicked out of the bathroom. There were too many of us in the bathroom, my siblings said. They were so nice. I was sitting there, organ's playing by itself, continuing to play by itself. I went and I got the keys finally after crying my eyes out and locked the organ up. It stopped playing only for the keys actually start jingling and stuff by themselves in the other room, and our toys started playing by themselves, and there were no batteries in it. We had presences that were felt, there were odd knockings, things would move on their own. One of the most terrifying experiences that I had personally, I came home, my sister was supposed to have been home, but she wasn't. I come to an empty house, and I hear something in the kitchen, so it's like, oh, you know, is that you? And she doesn't respond, so I go to investigate it, and the silverware in the drawer was shingling by itself, clanging together in there, and so I actually started running to go lock myself in the safest room in the house, which is the bathroom, because it's got a lock on the door, and I go to lock myself in the bathroom, and the downstairs bathroom was locked, and nobody's home. So that freaked me out, so I tear up the stairs to go to the second floor and lock myself in that bathroom. And I hear the silverware is clanging, coming up by me. And it actually started hitting the bathroom door, like, repeatedly, and I was just freaked. And I stayed in that bathroom for some time until my folks came home. They were like, you know, what are you doing in the bathroom? And I just like, had a breath into the silverware. And they're like, what are you talking about, silverware, you know, flying at you? And there was actually a spoon left by the door on the outside, and I'm like, there it is, you know. You know, just because I'm involved in UFOs and things of that sort, that all this stuff just so happens to happen to me, you know, with ghostly-like stuff. I've now come to the conclusion that it wasn't a ghost, that it was actually something related to the alien phenomena. Shadow people, I can't help but to think that they had something to do with it. My mother passed earlier that year before all the haunting, like, poltergeist stuff happened. A lot of people say maybe my mom did it. Like, why would my mom want to terrorize us kids? You know, I doubt it.
94 or 95 that said there was a Long Lake monster. They said this thing was huge. It was black and yellow. It was in the water, and it had to be about 25 feet long. And they told this to Carl Dentz, who is deceased now, but he had the garage, the mobile garage in Dundee. And they said they would never come back to Long Lake again. He said they were frightened, and Carl wasn't one to josh. In 1989, there was a farmer on Vista Drive, John Dins, chased his cows out of the barn. They came back in. Chased them out again. They came back in. He went out to see what was out there. Here was a big saucer-shaped object to the south and east of his barn. So he went back in the barn to go up and tell his wife. He had to go through the barn because of the fences. By the time he got to the other end of the barn, they were gone. So in 89, there was a triangular-shaped object went over Mr. Ed's, and it got over west of Vista Drive, which is a big marshy area, and it dropped little red balls out of it. It appeared to the people that watched it from Mr. Ed's campground. And they bounced along the marshy area. There were 3 or 4 of them. I don't recall exactly. But they said all of a sudden they went back to the ship, culminated, went back in the ship, and it was gone. Just that quick.
We started this thing over a bottle of beer when I was stopped by Benson's here. I said, hey, Bill, I've seen these UFOs out here, and I saw them in Elmira before I moved over here. And I said, why don't we start something like a UFO days like they got at Elmwood, over at Belleville. Tonight I was here, I was moved in. A green light went over my cottage, very slow, and I could hear a mental impression. It said, we want you to do something here. After that, it went down the lake and went way to the south end, did a slow 180-degree turn, turned into a white light. And when it came in front of me, I was watching it, it did this, dipped up and down about 8 times, and it would have torn the wings off a jet.
In 1990, we started UFO Days, and the reason we started was like-minded people could come and share their experiences without being laughed at or scoffed at or that type of thing. People that go out on Long Lake fishing come in and they laugh at me before they go out there. Some of them have come in and said they have seen strange lights in the sky.
I just want to show you something now that happened last year. I want to ask how many of you people saw this. This is when we were down sitting by the lake, and about 10 o'clock, this is what happened. This thing here went past us, and it pulsated about 5 times. How many were here when we saw that? Okay, yeah. And then it got like this, and it dropped a thing from the bottom. Here you can see this thing being underneath the bottom. Then it went up towards the north.
Last year, July 21st, 2001, in this very spot, 50-plus witnesses saw 3 orbs fly from south to north, followed by a 4th orb with 2 other orbs rotating around us.
It's the 4th object with the red orb with the 2 objects circling around it.
You can see that it was very erratic.
UFO Wisconsin was formed to let people know that there's a reporting center here in Wisconsin that they can report to Wisconsin sightings. There's a slew of other reporting agencies in the United States, National UFO Reporting Center, MUFON, Center for UFO Studies, just to name a few, and they deal with more of an international, national type investigations, and we felt that Wisconsin wasn't getting enough attention for its sightings.
I was working with a guy called Bob Miller. I started the W files. I looked at the main site. I looked at it was UFO Roundup. Half the UFO reports are from Wisconsin. Why doesn't someone put up a Wisconsin website? Bob, told me week after week, why don't you do it then? And eventually I'm like, well, maybe I should.
At Dundee, Wisconsin, at the Long Lake, going out there for a meeting that Heidi Hollis was putting on for UFO to You. We met Jim out there. He was the webmaster for the W Files, which deals with the paranormal and strange things that happen here in Wisconsin. And we talked to him about starting this site. He thought it was a great idea. And at the time, he had 172 UFO reports on his site that he was collecting. And he graciously handed those over to us.
In a state that has a number of Indian mounds, 2 were found along the newly constructed Highway 151 between Platteville and Belmont in 1881. Here a strange incident occurred within sight of Belmont Hill, not far from the site of Wisconsin's first capital. The mounds, long since plowed over, were part of a farm owned by a German immigrant farmer named Nodolf. On a night in June, during a thunderstorm, while the Nodolfs were in bed, a mother heard the children crying above the noise of the storm. When she checked their room, both children were missing. After waking her husband, the 2 began a frantic search, finding their missing children just outside the door, standing in the rain. As they brought them in by the fire, they discovered neither child was wet. Neither one knew how they had gotten outside. Every door and window remained locked and were far too heavy for the youngsters to lift anyway. and both children began to stutter, something neither had done before. They stuttered for the rest of their lives, never recalling what happened that night.
Area 51 gets so much attention. Everybody's looking at Area 51. What better way to test your top secret aircraft is to take it to a state where no one's even looking. You go up into the northern part of the state, everybody knows it's very wilderness, spread out. They could have a base up there. They could be testing these aircraft up there, and we would have no idea. The top of our state is heavily covered by military training areas. If you look at an aviation map, you'll find it. They're called MOAs. Do you know that of the 12 members, 3 were born in Wisconsin? If the theories are right, that there is an ultra-secret Area 51 here in the Black Projects. Right there, you have 3 people that are tied to Wisconsin would know.
If you want to know the truth about flying saucers and you want to find out the origin and what's really happening and who is really responsible, you have to go back in time, not to World War I and not to World War II, but go prior to that, to the year 1880, when a man by the name of Nikola Tesla began developing an electric flying machine called a dirigible torpedo. That is the origin or genesis of the flying saucer. He originally took those designs, patents, and blueprints and headed to Washington, D.C. after that time and approached the United States government and said, look guys, I've got this great technology, we can do business together, we can really go places. Would you mind financing me and helping me out with my work? U.S. said, well, forget it, we don't want anything, we're not interested. So if you think about it, guess where he went? He went to Germany, and Germany financed it. This is the chance block V-173, which was a flying pancake proposal in the mid-40s.
If people want evidence, all they have to do is go and look at a lot of carvings here and there, and this is actually one of them from Egypt 1000 BC. This was something that was pointed out, I found on a website that was pointing out how this looked very similar to a helicopter. I don't know if the Egyptians actually flew around in this, but you gotta wonder, why the heck would they have something like that so similar? It's like a hovercraft. I thought that was kind of cool. There's actually ancient artifacts all over the world, but it looks like an alien to me. 1000 BC in Italy. You see the little guy there with the little glowing marks going around his head, and he's wearing some kind of protective covering over his head. You gotta wonder if that's actually some kind of headdress if they were back then, or if that's an alien or somebody visiting that needed some kind of protective gear. Some people argue that these might be ghosts. It's very much like our astronauts out here embraced by a demon. There are actually people that have had some kind of intrusion by alien beings. The names that they used to call them back then were incubus. And these were the demons that actually preyed upon women as they slept. If you actually saw what they look like, and they look a lot like this, it's not so cutesy. The aliens that do the abductions and whatnot, these are usually the gray alien beings. Not only do they rape people, but they also impregnate these individuals also to create these alien hybrids. I mean, it sounds like something from a science fiction movie, but I assure you there's several people out there that go on to their doctor, yes, you're pregnant, baby disappears, and the doctor has some kind of weak diagnosis that the lady's body absorbed their child. And I'm sorry, but my dog has a hard time digesting bones in his stomach, where fluids are to digest bones and whatnot, and you're going to say somebody's uterus can absorb bones and tissue like that. That's something else. But I tend to believe that this is actually a real phenomenon. This is actually a depiction that somebody has of their alien hybrid child that was shown to them. There ain't no way to make those guys look cute. I don't see too many t-shirts of them, They're usually between 6 and 7 feet tall, from the reports that I've heard. I've had a few encounters with them, but not as they are, with all scaly and whatnot. Only a couple times have I seen one, and it was a positive one. There's actually positive alien beings. You can't always categorize these guys to be one way or another. It all goes back to trusting your gut instinct. I mean, you can't really trust what you're seeing. These are the guys that often intrude upon women. They attack, they scratch, they bruise. I believe they punch and bite also. Many of you that have come across my website, I spoke of my friend named Amanda. She's an artist. She depicted this alien that actually tried to kill me one time. A lot of people wonder where some of this disinformation that's coming around about, aliens and UFOs and where all that's coming from. They're not always human that are coming up with this kind of information. And actually, this guy is a UFO researcher. They shapeshift. And that's, again, it sounds like something right out of a science fiction movie, but those guys are no joke. I've heard several stories of people that say, you know what, I was hanging out with my friend, I looked to my left and I turned back to my right, and there's this reptilian standing there in their place instead of my friend, you know? And it's like, you know, these are people that are totally innocent, totally not into the subject, and they just happen to come across this. And they're like, you know, am I losing my mind, you know, that I actually saw this happen? I'm like, no, actually, you know, there are beings that go around and imitate themselves to be human.
This is Mon. This is a main contact I've had for 27 years. She's about 5'4" tall, blonde hair. She can pass for a human. She has been on the planet at least 7 times. She is a shuttlecraft pilot. She shuttles people back and forth to bigger ships, and her job was to talk to us and open our minds to that there's a lot more in the universe than we ever dreamt there was. Her planet is Surat, and that's in the Big Dipper, and it takes 93 minutes to get from Earth to her planet by their ships, and that's all it takes. Are very honest, and they talk about us being open, honest, and love each other. 1986, she left to go on a leave. She was attacked by a rogue bunch of aliens, and she crashed. And she had 2 friends on board ship with her. They were both injured. After that, she received a new ship. This is what her first ship looked like. Her second ship was rectangular, actually it's more boomerang shaped. It was black, and they can change the color of it. They can change the shape of it. And when I saw it, it had these red lights around it. I first saw it over my garage, and I followed it into the country. And we live, maybe about 12 miles from the airport, and they have the towers going to the airport. And I'm watching the ship, and I'm thinking, my God, it's so low, and it's so wide, it's not going to get between the towers. And as it got to the towers, it slowed down, it flipped on its side, went through, flipped back, and all of a sudden it took off, and it was gone in about 3 seconds.
Picture shows what I'm in contact with. I believe this. I don't tell this to many people. It's about the first time I've probably ever said this to anybody. I'm in contact with something. I will play you where she came on my radio program in Fond du Lac, and she's singing, talking about the forced vaccine thing and about how they're going to dilute it down. It's so strong. And she sings down, 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 and you'll hear it. She picked it up.
This is the voice that this came over your radio, and you taped it. It did not come over the radio. Oh, this came over your tape recorder. On your tape recorder. But it was never heard it on the radio. Now, when you said down, then the woman's voice was singing down, down, down like that. And she goes up in the last note. But to me, it sounds like the Burlow commercial. No. I'm going to play it. But the Burlow commercial has too many syllables in it. All right. Secondly, we'll let Sean Kaiser. Yeah. He's got the headphones on. Here we go. Right on the front page of the Milwaukee Journal, even talked about how powerful the shots were, and they're planning to dilute from down, which I wouldn't give you a nickel for it, as far as it being dependable on it.
I guess you could say I was given a little hint that he wasn't exactly who he appeared to be. And I didn't approach him. I just denied meeting up with this guy as I was going to. I was on the phone, was canceling, my plans to go meet up with him. And he's like, oh, that's cool, that's fine, whatever. And his phone beeps, and he's like, oh, that's my publicist, I'll call you right back. He never called me back, but that's not the point. Any kind of doubts that I ever had about what was revealed to me about this guy not being human all came clear when I put down the phone, and it felt like Jean-Claude Van Damme got a double-footer kick at my stomach, and I flew halfway across the room and landed on the floor. And I tell you, I couldn't even breathe. I just lost all my breath. And I've since learned that creatures like this do these psychic punches. I have no other way to describe it because I didn't see him. I knew he had something to do with it. He projected it over the phone. I don't know how he managed it, but it happened. I mean, my friend was standing right there and watched it happen. So these guys are not very friendly. And they're very domineering, very sexually oriented in their attacks towards people. I haven't heard of anybody giving birth to alien hybrids of these kinds of creatures, though.
Then they electrically charge the exhaust gases to reduce the infrared signature. And what happens when you do that is you have what is called an electrogravitic propulsion system. So there is some type of anti-gravity propulsion system being employed in the B-2. I've heard reports that when the B-2 actually takes off on takeoff, cars within the general area just die out. Electrogravitic, G-R-A-V-I-T-I-C. There were 7 CCD cameras around the upper crew compartment and 1 on top for a total of 8. And these could all be slewed in tangent conjunction with each other that produced a synthetic vision system on the inside of the pilot's visor. And that's how the pilots actually saw. Directly below the seat, there were 2 9-foot diameter counter-rotating plexiglass plates that produce a static electric charge. When you follow down the central column here, at the lower section of the central column, there were 11.25 pounds of plutonium-238. And basically how this craft actually worked, they would use the plutonium-238 to send an electric charge inside a gigantic Tesla coil. And once that happens, there was a magnetic field that was basically developed directly above this craft. These magnetic field lines were then projected onto these gigantic capacitor plates, and they could individually charge these capacitor plates to control pitch, yaw, and roll. Once the initial startup has begun on this craft, they tap into what's called the ambient zero-point energy field. They no longer need any input from the nuclear reactor. And according to the 5-star general who was giving a lecture on this craft at Norton Air Force Base, stated that the pilots could be to Mars and back by lunchtime and could be flying at 50,000 miles an hour, make a 90-degree right-angle turn, and the pilots feel no G's at all. I know that sounds incredible, but what they're doing here is they're creating their own anti-gravitational field which cancels out the effects of inertia. So these pilots are feeling no G's at all. It doesn't matter how many G's. This thing creates its own gravitational field. There is no inertia. So these pilots aren't feeling any G's. We interviewed one of the engineers at Lockheed who was working on this program, and he stated, quote, "We have things flying in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas drool." That's the kind of technology that we are paying for without any congressional oversight.
I can recall going up to the craft, and because of the differences between certain pilots, I can tell who is piloting and where we're going. If we're going from a small shuttlecraft to an intermediate craft and then to the larger one. Different docking bay procedures are used. That's how I can tell the difference.
You mentioned earlier that these were like recall experiences or like memories of dreams or whatever. Have you ever had any kind of conscious exposure to what you've been talking about? You know, in a waking state, in other words?
In a waking state, no. But what I look for in my recollections are motion, touch, feelings of texture, if there's any odors, any sounds or winds, something other than just a visual to verify what I'm experiencing is actually an experience.
We're like 19th and Fond du Lac right now. It's because I actually saw one of the biggest UFOs I'd ever seen in my life here going south on Fond du Lac. From the southwest side, I actually saw this big bright light coming, following my friend and I. It was about 3 in the morning, 1990, that I saw this, and this light actually kept following us, and I pointed out to my friend, I'm like, what do you think that thing is? And she could barely see it because she was driving, and I just kept an eye on it, and we continued all the way down where Fond du Lac actually meets 4th and Broadway exit. This is exactly like right near the end of the 4th and Broadway exit where it actually was right over us and hovered there for quite a bit as we were driving and then took off towards Lake Michigan. This light kept getting brighter and brighter, and I pointed out to my friend again, I'm like, that thing is following us. And she's like, isn't that the moon? And I'm like, if that's the moon, it's going to hit us. She actually started kind of freaking out with the steering wheel, and I said, yeah, you better keep your eyes on the road. And she's like, I don't see this, I'm not witnessing this. I'm like, well, you're witnessing it, and I'm seeing it too. The whole body of the ship, of the craft that we saw, glowed an orangish red, like the sun almost, but things didn't so much like, you know, you think everything would light up, but it didn't. I'd never seen anything like it before. I'd never seen anything photographed like that before either. The size of this thing, I'd say it was 3 to 4 football fields in length. And I tell people it was very much like Independence Day. You looked up, all you could see was a craft. It just took up the whole sky. It came right over our heads, looking up, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, I've heard about missing time with a lot of people that have had abduction stuff. And I was like looking at the clock, and I'm looking back up at the thing. I'm like, okay, I'm not missing any time here. And the thing started to rise back up into the night clouds, and it lit up everything as it went up. And my friend's like, I didn't see anything, I did not see that. And the thing came back down, and it took off in a heartbeat. It was gone. It came around the 4th and Broadway exit here, and it followed us all the way up, and was kind of coming from the direction of downtown Milwaukee here. So it's pretty cool. I called Mitchell Airport, I called the police, I called news stations to see if anybody reported this thing. Although it was at 3 in the morning, I'm not a drinker or anything like that. People say, were you drinking? No, I wasn't drinking anything. Nobody had seen anything. Nobody reported anything. And the police were very curious to hear what I saw. So it was International Airport.
How far back do you think some of these experiences go?
I think my earliest one was probably when I was 7 or 8. I woke up, I ran outside because I thought it was the end of the world, because in this experience, I literally could feel the heat from what I was seeing. It was like a volcano going off in my backyard. And we don't have volcanoes in Wisconsin. I get recall on a monthly basis. Sometimes it's a couple weeks between experiences, or a month, but on an average it could average out about once a month.
People ask me, you know, what aliens have you seen, how many have you seen? And to be honest with you, I can't even count how many different types of aliens I've seen. This is one being that I haven't had any dealings with, direct dealings with, I guess. Maybe I have, they just didn't say, oh, by the way, you know, I'm from the ones that they call the Nordics. They're very strong looking, the males and the females, very good looking, blonde hair, blue eyes usually. A lot of people that have seen the Nordics see them working hand in hand or directing around the great alien beings that I showed earlier. I'm sure several of you have heard of the story called Fire in the Sky, the story about Travis Walton and how he was taken up into a ship. He was missing for several days. The movie that was based on that story, he was just shown being drugged through a ship by overly sized great alien beings and whatnot. They did not actually show the alien beings that he had the most direct contact with, I guess you could say, which were the Nordic beings. And he woke up after he was taken up into the ship, he woke up on a table, sees these tiny little grays, and he smacks one upside the head with some kind of rod. And he's like freaking out. He's seeing these little aliens around him. And when he sees one of these guys come towards him, and he's thinking, oh, cool, a human, you know, they've come to rescue me type of thing. And he willingly goes and follows this guy out of the ship and gets led into another room where another one of these beings comes in and pins them down on a table. If you're like Travis Walton and you're totally sitting there in the middle of these gray alien beings and you see somebody kind of human coming your way, you're thinking, oh, thank God, you know, this is somebody human. They calm you down. And if they're able to calm you down, they're able to get their way with you, you know. So, and these grays are very much known for shape-shifting.
Perhaps the most famous of all abductees is Whitley Strieber, who in 1987 wrote the book Communion, based on his experiences. His personal accounts are well documented in that book, which opened up a lot of doors for those who believed they had similar experiences and didn't know how to deal with them. Strieber claims to have been abducted repeatedly, beginning with a train trip from Madison, Wisconsin, in July 1957. He remembers looking out the windows at the thick pine woods and seeing above the landscape a great hooked or triangular-shaped object floating in the air. As he recalls it, one moment he was in the train, the next sitting in a bed in which his movements were restricted. Before him were a row of comatose soldiers sprawled on platforms. Beside him was a yellow-brown creature with a copper-colored wand, explaining to him that the soldiers were examined and sent home. He remembered his father and sister being there with him, and the next thing he knew, He was back on the train, violently ill. While the experience dimmed from memory, he recalled this and other abductions under hypnosis. He became convinced of what had happened to him, and even took a lie detector test to verify it. Another abduction scenario was communicated to J. Rath, author of the book version of the W Files. In it, an electronics technician claims how he and his family had been visited on more than one occasion.
My encounters began at the age of about 6, when I was visited by a dark-robed being in my bedroom. A bunch of years later, in 1972, my wife and I saw a bright light in front of our car as we were driving down the highway late one night. And this craft was about 50 feet above us, and it didn't make any sound. We were overcome with intense fear, and we just drove like crazy back to our house, only to realize that we were missing 2 or 3 hours. Then in the 1980s, our daughters had encounters in the trailer home in which we lived at Iron Ridge. And one daughter saw toys floating about the room when she was laying down for a nap. And after that, she remembered a hand going inside of her and intense pain in her side. By the time she was 16 years old, she had not yet begun menstruating. Now, on examination, doctors discovered that she had no reproductive organs. Now, we know from her medical records that she was completely intact as a child. Others of our children have since seen beings in their bedrooms. Then in the summer of '91, when we were living in North Freedom in Sauk County, I saw a fireball fall from the sky. Now, later that summer, I saw colored lights flashing outside the window and remember myself running around and screaming, "They're back! They're back!" I don't have a clue why I did that. And then in December of the same year, my youngest daughter claimed she heard a rocket ship just outside her window. Now, of course, we were concerned, so we called the authorities and found out that other people in the area had reported seeing lights and hearing similar noises. We also got a mysterious and anonymous call from Washington, D.C., claiming that he had agreed with all we said we experienced. Then in 1992, our family doctor examined both our daughters for the school physical, and I was shocked. I found that the reproductive organs in both of our girls had been removed. Now, neither one has ever had surgery. After that, we moved to Algoma, where we were again visited by strange lights descending down into our yard. And since then, we haven't been visited.
In 1950, Immanuel Velikovsky put together a new thesis on the formation of the solar system based on many facts, but relying heavily on myth and folklore. Among his claims, he argues that in 1500 BC, a gigantic comet equal in size to the Earth and belonging to Jupiter, or Jupiter's system, swept past the Earth, causing great catastrophes worldwide, including the Great Biblical Flood, with its gravitational pull. The strange new comet eventually was pulled into a new orbit by the Sun and became the planet Venus, venerated as a goddess in many early cultures. Although other scientists were quick and nearly unanimous in decrying his theory nonsense, Velikovsky persisted, citing a list of facts of ancient catastrophes and questioning the methods by which previous science had been done. Since Velikovsky had indeed earned a blizzard of degrees from universities all over Europe, his work justified a worthy investigation, if only to prove him wrong. Stepping into this field in the 1960s was the Dutch Eric van Daniken, who issued forth a new proposal based on ancient artifacts. What van Daniken hypothesized was the idea of, what if Earth had been visited thousands of years ago by ancient astronauts from another planet? What if these ancient star travelers not only stopped by, but even influenced life on this planet, enough to eventually become the gods and heroes of all civilizations' ancient myths, even being some of the divinely inspired angels we've recorded over time? Like Velikovsky before him, he used myth and folklore, as well as archaeological evidence, to solve riddles of the pyramids, the Nazca Lines, Easter Island, Mayan inscriptions, and a whole range of other such material to prove his theory. Van Daniken received almost the same reaction as Velikovsky, but was just as undaunted in his claims. He did, however, popularize the idea in the mind of a segment of the general public. Following in his footsteps is Zechariah Sitchin, a scholar of the ancient Middle East, who claimed the solar system originally had 12, not 9 planets. It was this 12th planet which entered our territory from another star system, bringing with it another civilization from which were descended the ancient astronauts, who eventually became the gods of our myths and created Atlantis here on Earth. In the Lost Book of Enki, he claims the entire history of this race of extraterrestrial superbeings is recorded in ancient Sumerian. Sechin has claimed to have translated recently discovered cuneiform fragments and connected them with long-known Mesopotamian myths to knit together what is a vast epic of how the gods came to Earth, bred humans for their use, started up a great empire, only to have it fall in the end. Like both Velikovsky and von Daniken before him, at a glance his theory seems to be a mishmash of science and myth, and reads like a smorgasbord of Mediterranean, Mesopotamian, and biblical legends. A spectacular read, perhaps, whether history or fiction, but at the moment Sechin's proposals of ancient astronauts as gods and a rewrite of history are meeting the same response as his predecessors. If Sechin can be topped, perhaps Jose Arguelles, who also digs into the past to explain present and future, has done so with his analysis of Mayan calendar, astronomy, and myth. Using an array of mathematical techniques and other methods, Arguelles has used Mayan calendrical astronomy to predict, in hindsight, the various events of many centuries using the long cycles suggested by the ancient priesthood. Not only has he come upon patterns that fit with the course of history, Mayan and otherwise, but bases many things on the revolutions not only of the Earth around the Sun, but of the Milky Way galaxy itself. According to Arguelles, the Mayans predicted events that happened as the Sun and Earth pass a river of particles strewn across the galaxy, and that somewhere deeper in the heart of the galaxy lies the transmission of a beam of light that influences, possibly deliberately, the history and welfare of things on Earth. Extraterrestrial visitation by television transmission, so to speak. All this possibly because of an interest some other world has on our soil, perhaps even physically visiting the place sometime in our past. This implies that the Mayans themselves were extraterrestrial, or rather, descendants of an Atlantis established by extraterrestrials. Not only that, but the Mayan calendar ends with our year of 2012. It is the end of a Mayan cycle, and according to Arguelles, big changes in history have always happened during the changes in these cycles. Following in the line of Velikovsky, von Daniken, and Sechin, Arguelles is being taken only so seriously.
It's basically myself, Jennifer, and Jim A., who's editor of Pancake Perspective, and he has a lot of input, giving us some feedback and how the site looks, how we should be doing things. It's always nice to hear an outside view. We do have other support personnel throughout the states. We do work with a lot of other UFO groups. If any of these people were interested in obtaining information on a report and following up on it, investigating, we're more than happy to give the information to these organizations to follow up on.
The UFOs are my main interest. I mean that's. But I also have ghosts, Bigfoot, and many other things on the site.
What do you tend to get most of these days?
Bigfoot. It has been the most reports, but they're hard to verify. It's not like UFO reports. You have like 20 a week.
As the government conspiracy type thing goes, that they're watching us and following us, I have not noticed any of that. We have been contacted by other organizations to work together, and we have done those on a couple of projects. What it's all about is getting to the truth of the UFO matter, what it is, what's causing it. Like the government harassing us, the Men in Black showing up on our door, we have not had that happen yet.
Defenders of the Universe, the Men in Black, these guys are being presented as the Defenders of the Universe. People really knew what these guys were about and what they're doing and how they're harassing people that have seen UFOs and aliens and trying to get them to remain silent. I think they would be, praising this so much. But I admit, I like the movie. I just think another one needs to be done to show the true story to it and be just as popular. I doubt it would be if they had creatures that look like this in it. Sometimes I hear that they look kind of Asian in appearance and color, but their eyes are solid black. A friend of mine was helping with some kind of immigrational process. They're about to close the borders, make it a lot more difficult for people to immigrate to the United States. It's like mid-70s or something like that. And he was helping to situate people into the country, give them a place to live, a job, and whatnot. He usually worked in the office or something like that, trying to place people, and he was asked to come down one time to the warehouse where they had some of these people, and they're all Asian people in there. And they kind of kept them into the front part of the warehouse. They didn't want them to really go back where all these hordes of people, new immigrants, were at. And he was standing in the doorway, kind of, that entered into the warehouse. And he said, it was divided. There was Asians, from China on one side, and looked like Asians on the other side, except for all of them had shades on, even the kids. So I thought that was really weird, and it's really dark in this warehouse, so I couldn't understand what was going on. I was standing there, and I was showing some papers to this one guy, and I'm talking when one of the little kids from the people with the shades came running up to me. And they're like, the people freaked out and said, "No, you can't come in." And the girl stopped and her glasses fell off. And she looked up and she had solid black eyes. He said, they looked at me to see if I responded or reacted to it. And I was just like, "I am not looking. I'm looking the other way." He said, "I finished out my day and they never heard from me again." He said, "I was placing what looked like aliens into our society." So I couldn't believe it. So, is that a Men in Black story? I don't know. I don't think it was human.
In 1999, we were on the pontoon boat, 6 of us. And we were on the south end of the lake, and we saw a big light in the sky, and I think it was one of the planets. Now, which one it was, this was the second week in September, on Thursday. Right of that light, or that planet, there was another light. And I said, "I don't remember seeing this light, or this planet, or whatever this light is before." So we got talking and looked away, and we looked back, and it was considerable different from where it was in the first place. First it was on the right side, and then it was on the left side of the planet. So we watched it all the way up the lake, and it would get real big, probably the size of a planet, and then it would go to nothing, and then come back in the same manner. We got to the north end of Long Lake, and we were going very slow. 4 fighter jets came from the west and went right to that spot. It disappeared. The fighter jets turned and started back west. It reappeared. They went back to it. It disappeared again and came right overhead from where we were. It appeared to be, or a little bit to the west, and the fighter jets chased it. And then it just, when they got close to it, it just gone. Wherever it went, I have no idea. But that was, and we never heard anything. I had it on the radio in KFIZ in Fond du Lac with Bob Keane. We never heard anything other than that.
While preparing this film, I noticed that my own neighborhood has had its share of incidents. On November 10, 1975, on Beverly Place in Wauwatosa, barely a mile from where I live, a couple in their 60s had an encounter with strange little men. At the doorbell, Anne discovered a strange-looking and strangely dressed person holding a large white staff on the other side of the front door. The person was mute when asked what he wanted, so Anne called her husband Pete. Pete said the stranger had a pointed chin, a tiny puckered mouth, and a face that looked the color of smoked meat, covered with deeply lined grooves. He also wore something that looked like a straw hat. The stranger rapped his staff on the pavement in reply, then stood away. Behind him were 4 other people who looked and dressed the same, all with tall white staves. All had the appearance of oversized gnomes. They turned and began to leave, and as they did so, they bounded and floated across the lawn and down the street like astronauts walking on the moon. When they were gone, the couple called the police, but nothing came of any investigation. There have since been other reports of sightings in the sky over the Menominee River Parkway, 2 blocks from the couple's home. There have also been reports of flying objects over what was then called Concordia, and now referred to as Cops Park, only a block away from my home.
As one person, you don't have enough time to research them and verify them.
How much time do you usually put into a website per week or whatever?
About 8 hours a day. The main place I'm branching out is into the Jesus thing and the biblical aspect of it. I mean, you look at, even like the Gospels, and I'm seeing a lot of UFO accounts there.
It's also an overwhelming feeling of no doubt in your mind that this is what has occurred. A lot of people want proof They want you to tell them, well, why don't you bring back a piece of the ship? That has never occurred to us to do something like that. We realize that it's not for everyone's ears to hear. For those that have ears, they will receive the message that we're trying to tell. There are benevolent beings out there. I'm allowed to interact freely, walk about freely, speak, sometimes sit in on lectures, sometimes conduct lectures. Right from the start, I realized that I did not start researching on the abduction scenario right away until I got into this a little bit further, but I realized early on that my experiences were much different from those that you heard about.
I wasn't quite sure what he was seeing, so he blew up these areas, and there's little black dots. He's wondering what those black dots are, and I'm like thinking, myself, what those black dots are. Looking at the chemtrails in the sky and also watching one white tanker spray, it correlates between the two, and we're talking over 50 miles distance between these two. And these people don't know each other. I've never heard about these black dots before. And I think it's something new.
If you think about it, at the close of World War II, the best the United States Air Force had was the P-51 Mustang. It was really the best fighter we had. However, when the ME-262s flew by the Mustang, there's nothing that American pilots could do. There's no question at all that the German Air Force was decades ahead of the Americans at that time. They had the first rocket-powered interceptor, which was the ME-163 Comet. They started inventing all these crazy, wacko inventions. Every possible, conceivable plane was tried. You see, the tried flew, this was a vertical takeoff helicopter, the Horton flying wing. This was a supersonic glider proposal. I mean, they were just doing every conceivable wild contraption you could ever imagine. In Kingdom Monday, they had the world's most advanced supersonic wind tunnel. We didn't even have this technology. This is a flying saucer pipe demonstrator that used a conventional 240 horsepower engine and ME-109 landing gear. It had plywood construction for the internal bulkheads and structures here. Newspaper reports from Germany talking about German flying saucers. This was the Triebflügel Model 2. Had a BMW 003 engine that could be vectored at 45 degrees, causing the outside rotating disc to rotate at 1,550 RPM for vertical takeoff. This is a report from Rudolf Luzer, who was a German general in World War II, stated point blank that the Germans were working on flying saucers. I saw some of them flying when I was there, so we have his testimony. This was an interplanetary craft that was 300 meters in diameter. Different proposal. For here you see the pilot has no seat belts, so apparently they were working on some device that could cancel out the effects of inertia back then. These 2 years prior to that, they were getting ready to bug out. They had an expedition to what they called New Schwabenland in Antarctica, where a contingent of German officials left on a research ship called the Schwabenland. And here you see the ship of all these German officials with the penguin in the front. They were mapping out some territory for Germany. So it's possible that some of the rumors are true that they actually set up some type of base at that time. Now, here's a report on the Covert Northrop facility. This is the radar cross-section range at Tehachapi, California. And anyone here can go visit.
In the group, it started connecting. None of us have full memory, but all of us bring back bits and pieces that put together make one puzzle. We realize that we belong to a team or a system that is based off this ship we have nicknamed the P ship. By the way, that is roughly the size of Chicago.
Do you ever get any reports that you think are just total nonsense? Or do you get anything that you think people are...
Yes.
It's a put on?
Yes. Yeah, tons of them. About 90%, I'd say. But then the other 10%, you have to sit down and think, wait a minute, what's going on here?
So how do you separate the wheat from the chaff here?
I mean, it's personal preference, I think.
In 1978, when we tracked a little bit, I drove milk truck. I hauled milk to Chicago in a semi. I stopped in Plymouth to buy a tractor. I was going to buy a tractor for my mother's campground at Long Lake, Benson Century Camping Resort, and I was looking at new tractors. Well, I left at 3:30. I had to be in Kiel by 5 o'clock. I got to Kiel at 15 minutes after 5. I left at 3:30. That's maybe a 20-minute to half-hour drive. Idea. I noticed after that I had a scratch on my ankle, and it wouldn't heal for 2 or 3 weeks. And since it did heal, there's a brown spot on my ankle, and it's never gone away. But I don't remember seeing anything. It seems like I drove directly to Kiel, but I was 45 minutes to an hour lost time.
I was laying on my couch in the living room. 3 beings came into my living room, and I went with them on a ship, a much larger ship. And there I was introduced to a lot of different types of beings. And I went to a meeting where there were actually 16 different beings. And they were all from very small, kind of looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy, white in color, almost as round as they were tall. 2 beings that were over 7 feet tall. Some of them looked very much like us, and some of them looked very different.
I had 3 of these in my living room at one time. They came and they took me to a larger ship, and what I thought was interesting is they walked me right straight through the door. And I thought, this is really neat. I wish I could do this all the time.
I went across the road, and there was a field across the road, and there was a ship on the ground. And I was thinking in my head, how can this ship be here on the ground right next to Highway 41, which is a major highway north and south in Wisconsin? And they weren't seeing the ship. How come these cars are going by and nobody was stopping, slamming on their brakes and getting out of the car and looking? And they said to me in my mind, they didn't speak, but they told me in my mind that they had a force field up, and they only allow people to see it that they want to see it.
I learned actually while living here to be able to confront these beings and to not be afraid of them, and to know that I actually could have upper hand. A lot of people, you know, they have this like paralysis like thing when they're encountered with these beings, but I learned, especially from that encounter, that you can just, you know, go after them and respond on your own instinct and stand your ground, you know, take them down if you have to. After that certain episode and others like it, where I started being able to respond and react to these beings, I started seeing a different kind of presence. I really started seeing a lot of these creatures and not knowing how to respond to them. Probably 1993, 94 or something like that. I call them shadow people. I didn't know what to think of them. I never heard anybody call them that before. And I later learned through another contact that I started getting with one of my best friends that moved in with me, was that these shadows or shadow people were the boss. The Greys, they couldn't outright touch me. They could threaten and do whatever they wanted, but they literally could not get the upper hand. It was inspiring to know that I had found a way somehow to do that, but it was actually through a lot of the contacts and connections that I was having with other more positive alien beings that you'd never hear about. Ever since I was a kid, you know, I'd seen little things here and there, but I never got to have a head-on encounter with a creature like this until 1990, when I was living down in Iowa. I was staying there actually with a friend of mine's family's house, and we had to go walk somewhere. I could have sworn I saw something moving bush to bush as we're walking along, and you know, my friend walks a little bit ahead, and I'm like, I'm seeing things. I don't know what the heck I'm seeing here. We got to our destination. This thing jumped bush to bush, tree to tree, and then when we got to our destination and started heading back, this thing started following us again, tree to tree, like it waited for us. When we reached back to the house, I go to my friend, I'm like, what on earth was that? She's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know what it is. It's this huge, shadowy looking thing. It was about 10 feet tall. I don't know, it's huge. And she's like, well, draw it, you know, and I drew it out, and I drew this thing very much like this, with a head connected directly to its shoulders. And I said, yeah, it's all black. And she goes, oh, that. And I'm like, what do you mean, oh, that? She's like, oh, that thing's been following me for years. I don't know what to do about it. I was like, well, okay. That was actually my first time witnessing these guys just head on. I mean, instead of these little peripheral things. And then the next day, I guess this thing got a little bit ticked at me that I spotted it. I had to go upstairs to go get something from the attic part where I was actually staying. Ran up there, it's all dark upstairs. It was daylight, but the windows are so tiny you could barely see the light I go there, grab what I needed to, started heading back out to go back down the stairs, but I didn't even get out of the bedroom because this thing was standing there just heaving over me. Like, you know, just huge, like 10 feet tall, looking down at me. If you guys have ever been in a situation where you just, the panic, the fear, just like, you just freeze. And I just looked at this thing, and I knew it was trying to take me on, like, you know, this, you know, whatever. If this thing, if hate had a thickness to it, this thing could have killed me with it. It was just like a hate soup coming off from it. And I knew if I reacted in fear and ran, or if I did it in fear where I would strike out or panic, this thing would have me. So I knew I couldn't let that happen. I knew I had to stand my ground and face this thing head on. And this thing is sitting there facing me head on like that, and I knew it was blocking my way to get out. So I had to literally walk right through it. I was just crazy with, you know, I was scared. I was scared, but I wasn't going to let it know I was scared. And I didn't feel anything. I was numb. And I had to walk slowly. I didn't walk quickly. I just, it was like a slow motion thing because it was so hard to get over that fear to move my feet. And when I got to the top of the stairs, I literally melted, and I heard a thunk at the end of the stairs. But they opened up the door, and I let them know that their friend was upstairs, and he wasn't very happy that I spotted him.
What is occurring now at this particular period in time on Earth is a battle against good and evil, and both sides have their forces on Earth working, and we're part of that team for the benevolent side.
I had a lot of grays that would like get in my face while I'm sleeping, and I mean, they don't know personal space. They're like right here, and they have no nose to speak of, so imagine those big black eyes totally right on your face. And I was always able to wake up and respond and react to what these guys were doing. And I did belong to a UFO group at the time, and the things that were being said, you know, it was very much, you know, the alien abduction contact stuff, like you're paralyzed, you can't move, and I'm able to move. I don't understand, you know, how am I able to react to these guys? It turned out, as I was getting more and more able to respond to these guys, the less I was actually seeing of the grays. And these guys started stepping up their pace, coming in and coming in different forms. Shadowy looking blobs, especially gigantic spiders. I mean, I hate spiders. They must have knew I hate spiders, and it gets a certain reaction out of me. These are some of the forms that I've actually seen the shadows in. Little floaty cloud-like things like that. Sometimes just as streaks. And oftentimes you'll see these things from your peripheral vision and you don't know why that is. I was literally sitting in one of my many science classes, and they were talking about how your peripheral vision is more sensitive between the differences of lights and darks. And I literally said, "Oh, no," class, and everybody kind of looked at me, and I was just like, that's why I see these guys so much from the side. But it's one thing to see them from your side, and you know, you turn around, most times they're gone. Sometimes I turn to my side, and they're still there. So I know I'm seeing something. They also come sometimes as these little 4-foot, little hooded guys. I guess they can vary in height and whatnot. And they usually have these little red beady eyes. I don't see the eyes so much. I usually see their shapes. This is actually drawn by my friend Amanda, who saw these guys, and it's kind of funny because these things didn't want her to be able to see them either, and whenever she looked at them, they would do this. Literally send out this little spiral colored light, and it would make her head turn away from them, like, don't look at us, we're on you, you know, or something. It's just like, she said I kept looking back, and they'd spin that thing out at me again, and my head would turn to the side. Shadow cats. They come in all different shapes and forms, and they do this to deceive. If you want to come to me as you are, you know, I'm able to defend myself. But if you come to me as something else, that you confuse me, and this is what they're all about. They're all about trying to confuse somebody. I guess you could say I was really harassed a lot by shadow-looking cats like this. One of my worst encounters with these guys, I come home. I did actually own a black cat. His name was Pyramid. Sweetest cat, never meowed, real quiet, always hid all the time. come home, and I hear him just meowing like crazy. And I'm like, you know, Pyramid, what's wrong, you know? And he's just meow, 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 real loud, obnoxious. I get on my hands and knees, and he's underneath my futon, and I'm reaching for him, looking right at him, and I'm like, Pyramid, come here, you know, what's the problem? And he just keeps meowing when I feel something brush up behind me. And I turn around, and Pyramid's actually behind me. I'm reaching towards something that isn't my cat, but looks very much like a cat. And it meowed again after I realized, you know, holy crap, you know, this is not real. I picked up my cat and I backed out of the apartment. I don't know what it would have done to me if I had actually touched it, but it's just like out of a horror movie. You're reaching towards the monster, your hand's within inches, you know, and you realize it's a monster. I have several friends that have been over to my apartment and say, you know, whose cat? Whose cat is that? When I didn't have a cat, I'm like, oh, Jesus, not again. These are the lovely spiders that take up the whole ceiling. Isn't that pretty? How'd you like to wake up to that? I woke up to that many times, and guess how I usually wake up to it? Because they fall down on my bed and they bounce me so hard, and they scurry off. I'm like, whoa, you know? I mean, people that I've lived with actually would find me in the apartment trying to find the biggest shoe I can to smack the heck out of it so it won't come back. Probably my own personal thing because I don't like spiders, so they'll just shapeshift into anything. For crying out loud, they're just these black blobs. They could do pretty much whatever they want to. I thought I was getting pretty good, and then maybe I got a little bit too cocky because they got me really good one time. And that's me. See the braids? I'm levitating. I was watching TV, decided to sleep on my futon. My roommate's bedroom was like right next to where I was at. She woke up screaming my name because you see these black orbs on here. One of them had hit her in her room and woke her up, and she's wondering what the heck's going on. She sees all these other black orbs all around, and she leans forward in her bed to see me being levitated up to this gigantic crack in the ceiling with all these orbs around. And she screamed my name, and I just like, what, you know? And I woke up, and I tell you, I never hit a futon so hard. I smacked pretty far down, and I'm just like, what is going on, you know? And I'm looking at all these orbs all around. Those things didn't disappear. It took a very long time for those things to disappear. They kind of crowded in on the ceiling and started to kind of fade out, but I'm like, can you see them? I can still see them. Yeah, I see them. Oh, crap, you know, what's going on here? Why these guys stepped up their pace was because the Greys were not able to fool me, I guess you could say. And so they sent their boss in. You ever just be sitting there and you get these random thoughts that don't feel quite like your own, and they're kind of rotten, kind of dark, and you don't know why. Pretty much like that little, you know, religious thought that we had placed in our head that there's one devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, and they're both battling it out to tell you what to do. These guys are all about influencing people, dropping little nuggets in your head to make you think one way or another. Their power is actually in that, in influencing. And what they're doing right now is what they did to the Greys and the reptilians, these other alien beings, and any kind of being that intrudes upon your freedoms. I mean, I can't totally categorize and say all Greys do this or all reptilians do that. I mean, you really have to be able to decipher for yourself, you know, was it a positive experience? Not these kinds of experiences where, well, you know, they abducted me, they raped me, and they cut my gut open to see how things worked and whatnot. But then right afterwards, they taught me something really cool, you know? So I know those were the positive ones. That is a bunch of crap. You gotta have common sense. And the example that I give to people is like, you know, if I had a friend that kept coming over to my house and smacking me upside the head every time they did it, but then gave me a cookie right afterwards, I don't care about that freaking cookie. They can stay out of my house. If it felt bad in the beginning, it's bad all the way through. A lot of people are like, well, how do I decipher? You know, because one night, you know, they came and they did this, and the next night they did something really positive, though. If these things are able to shapeshift and make themselves appear as the good guys or the bad guys, I mean, you really can't trust your eyes. You have to be able to trust your heart. Be able to close your eyes and see what's before you. You know, it's not always the same guys that are coming towards you. And this is where I see a lot of conflict in the contact that's going on. People are misinterpreting, you know, well, it looked just like them, so I was pretty sure that was them, you know, so I said, sure, I'd do it. But there's something in you that just tells you that something's not quite right with these beings, but you let them in anyway. You always hear, people are getting hypnotized and finding out that they volunteered in some sort or fashion to have the kind of experiences that they're having. And if it's not good, why on earth would they do it? They're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and they don't know why. So that's what sent them to their psychiatrist in the first place. So why are they doing this?
They did take me up to a much larger ship, and that is the ship that I've had the most contact with. The captain of the ship that I met there, I kind of nicked him the Blue Big Bird, because it kind of looks like he's blue down, feathery on his body, but he's kind of shaped like Big Bird.
They took me up to a large craft and they introduced me to this being, and we call him Eric, and he's over 7 feet tall. He has almost a bird's head. Instead of a mouth, he has a beak. He has a very long neck. His arms are long for his body.
I knew he wanted to give me a hug, and I was kind of afraid, not terrified, but just a little afraid because he was so big. I realized that he wasn't going to hurt me, so I got a hug from him, and I wasn't quite sure if I wanted his arms around me because he had 5 appendages, and on the end of those were like talons, and I didn't know if I really wanted those around me, but boy, it was so nice and soft cuddling into that soft blue down on his body.
His legs are quite short, and his round, instead of feet, they're round.
And I knew at that point that everything that I had thought about aliens was wrong, because I had studied with a group that thought they're all blonde, blue-eyed, lovely creatures, and I realized that this was the number one lesson I had to learn, was that the aliens weren't all like us in looks, but that they were a lot of good beings out there.
He pilots a ship that's outside of our atmosphere, approximately 200 miles. It has been here for approximately 20 years. Yeah, from space it looks round, but it is approximately 40 miles across and 38 miles high. So this is a very big craft, but as I said, from space it almost looks round. As you get closer, you see that little bump on there? That's the command center. That's how small that is compared to the craft. And as you get closer to the command center, you can see it better. The command center is 3 levels, about 20 feet for each level. There are 17 crewmen at all times in there to help operate the ship. This is a cutaway of the P ship. This we did just so that you could compare the size. The round circle at the bottom, if that would be a craft 2.5 miles wide, this is how big it would look to the 40 miles across. The rectangular one is like a cigar craft, and that we have sized to 1 mile across and 10 miles long. The rectangular black one at the top, that is to show you how large the atmosphere machines are in this craft. They have to make atmosphere for anyone who comes on board.
Didn't you feel any fear or apprehension or just puzzlement when a bunch of these people started showing up inside your apartment?
Well,
they wanted you to walk off with them?
That didn't scare me because I felt just love and compassion coming from them. And this was not my first contact. About the first 10 years, I traveled with a camera. And back then it was a Super 8 movie camera. And I talked my family into giving me a real good 35 millimeter for my birthday. And anytime I've seen a craft or anything, I just was so awed that it just never entered my mind to pick that camera up and take a picture of it. Even if it was there, my mind just never comprehended to pick it up and take the picture.
You all seem to think that there was a time in a past life or something that you had made the decision to volunteer for this position. Is that sort of...
Yes, I did decide before I came here to work for the planet. I guess, I don't know why. Except that the planet really does need help. And I would like to do anything I could to help it along.
Do they ask you to do anything specific? Do they give you a set of instructions to?
Yeah, kind of instructions like go out and spread the word and just let people know that there aren't all little grays out there that are taking people against their will, and they would like that message to get out that there are good ones out there and they're here to help us. They're not here to hinder us, and they're not here to take over our planet or anything like that, which a lot of people are reporting.
Can you point to any kind of specifics as to what they might be doing as far as that help goes?
Well, they have ships out there ready to help if the planet gets bad enough that it needs to be evacuated. They also have ships that have plants and animals and that type of thing if we should get into real trouble with nuclear power or nuclear bombs, that they could help repopulate the planet if that would ever become necessary. And a lot of people are getting messages that this planet, volcanoes, windstorms, that type of thing, a lot of people are coming forward with messages like that.
Why do you think they do not contact CNN?
Well, I'm not so sure that they haven't talked to those people, but you know, it's the little people that make up the world, and we are actually the strength of any place. It's the little person. It's not, you know, the guy with the big money. It's not anything like that.
They can take craft up to 10 miles long. There's 7 levels of docking. Actually, I think it looks like our boat docks. The large crafts stay at the bottom because they need a lot of room to maneuver. The smaller crafts go to the top. In order to get on the craft from this area, you have to go through a procedure, and that procedure checks your DNA. They have a soul computer, and the soul computer checks the vibration of your soul, and if you don't match what they have in the computer, you are not allowed on. This is where the captain and the co-captain and all the big shots are. The bathroom, I thought, was very funny because the first time I went in there, I thought I'm going to use the facilities, and I had to touch myself up onto the toilet because it was so hot. The shower stall has just a slight lip on it because, as far as I can figure out, they do not use water to clean their bodies. It looks like doctor's office furniture, very square.
When I mentioned about volunteering for the type of contact that they're having, these beings could come to them in the middle of their sleep. They think it's a dream. They're having these really, really vivid dreams, which is really common amongst people that have alien contact. And there's a knock at their door, and it's their sister. Well, they see it's their sister, but something's not quite right with their sister. And they're actually it's something just a little bit wrong with them, but they let them in anyway. And it's like, well, why didn't you trust your heart to know that that wasn't exactly your sister, but you trusted that? It's like, well, yeah, I let them in and whatever. And it turns out that's them. You know, that's these beings. It's very much like inviting a vampire into your house. Once they're in, they're in. How do you uninvite a vampire in your house, though? It's about standing your ground. It's about saying, you know, no, you got to break your ties and your loyalties to some of these beings and what they're saying to you. I mean, everybody's born with exactly what they need.
This is a type of drink that I was served, and I call it Jello. And just as Jello starts to harden up, and you kind of roll it in the bowl, and it's thick like that, no taste, no nothing. But I had fun kind of rolling it in the glass to see how far I could roll it without it going over the lip of the glass. And it just was interesting that they would even serve me something. And I asked them what it was, and they said, well, you know, it's something like your happy juice, but it's all natural, and it does not have anything that would harm you. While I was there, I also some people with this on their heads. Not all species use the same type of atmosphere, and this they can use to breathe. This craft is specifically made so that many different species can come to this place. They can meet, they can discuss things, they can work out any differences that they have, and yes, they do have differences out there in space, just like we do.
I'm sleeping in my bed, and I wake up because I could sense something's in my room, and I open my eyes and it's my roommate, Amanda. I'm like, Amanda, what are you doing here? And I'm like, look just like her. And this thing was so pleased with itself, it smiled. Did you guys ever see Batman with the Joker and the way that smile came all the way up here? That smile went all the way up here, and I was like, oh, you're not Amanda. And that thing just kind of shimmied out, you know, like, oh crap, you know. I should have known, you know, my bed is about like three feet off the floor, and I was looking eye level at this thing. Amanda's not that short, you know.
Everything on the screen was in 3D. It made you feel like you were standing right there in the middle of it.
That's the Hat Man shadow. Several people have spoken about these guys coming around these days too. This is one that Amanda had seen. She woke up to this guy glaring at her like this. And she has a really good tactic to get rid of him. She screams at the top of her lungs. And I mean, it sounds like something right out of a horror movie. She shrieks, just shrieks. And she does this a lot. And I'm in the next room, and I hear one scream. I wake up. I don't move because, you know, this happens so much. I hear 2 screams. I'm thinking about getting up. 3 screams. That's when I start moving. I'm like, God, that thing isn't going away, whatever she's screaming at. So I go running to the door. She's like, oh, it just left. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, you really feel like she's being murdered or something. But that's her tactic, she said, because they can't stand her voice or something. I don't know. But she said, wow, he was a 3 screamer, you know? I'm like, golly, she's got a lot of wind in those lungs too. Those are long screams.
What they have on the ship is almost the same type of activities that we have. They do have swimming. These are memories. This is what we call sky cycles. One of them remembers driving this so fast, and it's kind of on a puff of air. And he went around the corner skidded. This is a people mover that they have.
I always was a believer. I also knew that I wasn't from here. I have very early childhood memories of wondering, studying my earth parents and wondering, knowing that I loved them, but wondering who they were. I knew that I came from the stars. As long as I can remember, I've been looking up at the stars, wondering where it was that I belonged.
Stargazing is one of the fun parts on the ship. We also have trees, they have water, they have what looks like clouds. That's how large this area is. And what they are doing is they are using it to make atmosphere. Because this is a self-contained ship. It grows all its own food. It builds anything that it needs for repairs. It's kind of like a handball. Also ice skating. The restaurant with a large swimming area where you can watch people swim as you were eating. This is a library that has many levels, lots of books. A lot of their books are on what looks like our palm pilots, and that their books are on that, but they miss being able to turn the pages of the books.
When I met the group, I had studied all my life. In fact, even as a child, I would bring my unconventional reading material home and hide it under my bed so my family didn't think that I was crazy or anything. So I've been reading as long as I can and researching, even when I didn't know my purpose for doing this. Once I connected with the group, my studies became a lot more focused, and my answers started coming to me. Not only did I begin having tons of visions during my waking meditation, but I started bringing back memories that I knew were not dreams. Now we have rooms on board. I have memories of my room, what it looks like, walking down the corridor, seeing the light that comes from everywhere and nowhere.
Her main job is a psychologist, psychiatrist on the ship. And she said that what she does is she melds with the mind. They come and they take us from our homes at night, shuttle us up to the craft. It does kind of look like the Jetsons.
There are claims of alien bases all over the world, and this region has its share. In Fond du Lac, there is supposedly a dual-purpose base. Above ground, a weather observatory, below ground, a place to test and store lethal weapons, and sell them to wealthy governments. In exchange for cataloging human hostages said governments will overlook in finding. This base holds some half-dozen ships, 3 dozen aliens, 1 dozen humans, and over 2 dozen hybrids. Meanwhile, southern Lake Michigan holds an underwater base, its tunnels leading every which way, also which are used as a weapons storage and test site facility. This base is twice the size as the one in Fond du Lac. The town of Elkhorn has an attack station directed at New York City and supposedly gets messages directly from the boss, who is headquartered in the Andromeda Galaxy. Turtle Lake, meanwhile, is a computerized communication center to all other alien bases on the planet, while also housing an alien justice center, all of it underground. This one is half again as large as the Lake Michigan site. All of these bases were reported by EarthToday.com and placed on the W-Files website. Needless to say, there is no proof substantiating any of this, and I found nothing out of the ordinary when I was at any of them.
Well, these guys are a little bit at odds with each other. There's been some examples through our history to show that there might be a war in our skies, like this painting that was done in 1561 over Germany. There are a lot of ships that started battling it out, and you see one over there that's crashed. You can see that on the hilly part there. Started shooting amongst themselves, and then all of a sudden that big black arrow-looking thing came over and calmed everything, and all the ships left. I'd say they were battling it out over something. Could it be over us, since it was over our skies? I think so. This is another invasion of black orbs that was seen. I think John had asked about there being black orbs in the sky. When you come in large numbers like that, with tons of crafts, you got to think that they're getting ready for some kind of battle or something, some kind of invasion of some sort.
In the 1840s, the Winnebago people told settlers of the stone teepees buried in Rock Lake, Jefferson County. In 1837, Captain Joseph Keyes began building mills at the eastern end of the lake, raising the water level. A town developed around it called Lake Mills. In 1887, 2 men out fishing were disturbed by what appeared to be a large log, and later a giant pickerel, until it raised its head. Sightings of the beast continued into the 1920s. By 1900, a pair of brothers named Wilson paddled across the water, lured by a long drought, early in the season when the water is clear of algae, and they saw an elongated stone pyramid. In the late 1920s, more ruins were spotted. In the 1930s, Victor S. Taylor was busy excavating Aztalan, an ancient Indian village 3 miles away. Max Knoll, an underwater engineer, put his recently invented diving gear to the test, but World War II interrupted further investigation. Finally, in the 1980s, Frank Joseph took up the challenge using military surplus to probe the lake's bottom. Among the things discovered in the area, some earthen mounds from the mound builder culture included a turtle mound and a headless giant mound between Rock and Mud Lakes, and a directional cross, all now destroyed, near Lake Sinisippi to the immediate northeast. Joseph found a number of ruins, including stone circle formations and solid monuments, which appear to be tombs rather than buildings, one of which was a long conical pyramid fallen on its side. But vision has always been poor in Rock Lake because of the silt and algae count. Aztalan village dates from 1100 AD, but the Rock Lake materials date from 1500 BC, thousands of years earlier. Beginning in 3000 BC, over 500,000 tons of copper, the purest in the world, were mined from Michigan's Upper Peninsula, mostly from Isle Royale. The mines were closed abruptly in 1200 BC, only to reopen 2300 years later in 900 AD. In 1320 AD, these reopened mines shut down for good, until the white man came and reopened those same mines for Michigan's copper trade. It is estimated that it would have taken 10,000 men 1,000 years to remove that much copper from the region using ancient techniques. Still, there is no evidence of grave sites during all this time period. Rock Lake just happens to be south of the harshest winter snow line in the region, and both Rock Lake and Aztalan show remains of a copper culture. Copper had limited appeal or need to the local American population, except as trade, but in Europe, the same time period is rampant with copper smelting in the famous Bronze Age. an age which still hasn't explained where all the copper came from to support the needs of the Mediterranean civilizations. Joseph was led to the Canary Islands, where the early natives were tall, white, blue-eyed, and blonde. The Canaries are named not after birds, but after dogs, Canari for canine worshippers. There is evidence of dog worship in the Rock Lake, Aztalan area as well. The Winnebagos refer to the Aztalaners as foreigners and also as white people. The Canari, at the time of Columbus, were known to have been great sea travelers at one time, and supposedly gave him the directions for traveling across the Atlantic to the New World. When Joseph was there, he found a long conical pyramid, like the one in Rock Lake, and met with a tribal leader in a town called Tirahena. There was a lake Tirahena nearby that resembled Rock Lake, and a story of a serpent that guarded it. Joseph found a connection to the Greek myth of Cadmus, in which a conical pyramid is protected by a serpent, which he slays to become the land's new king. Rock Lake was originally called Tirahena by the locals, though that name has no meaning in any Indian language. The town of Aztalan was destroyed by fire, leaving remains of cannibalism and other confrontations in its wake. There are strong ties to the Mississippian culture, capitaled in Cahokia, which fell prior to its formation, and archaeological evidence with the culture of the Aztecs, which came to prominence after Aztalan disappeared. The Aztecs claim they came from the distant north to form their civilization in central Mexico. What Joseph has done is put a grand scenario together using all these elements, and his story goes like this. At the same time as the first Egyptian pharaohs, European seafarers traveled across the Atlantic, who knows why, and up the St. Lawrence to mine the copper out of Upper Michigan. At the end of each summer they made their way to Rock Lake, then called Tirahena, where they stored and processed copper ingots over the winter. Stone sundials were built to facilitate in fixing schedules for sailing, planting, and harvesting, and the dead were entombed beside the lake. In spring, the ingots were floated down the Rock River to the Mississippi and into the Gulf of Mexico, where they crossed the Atlantic to the Canary Islands and into the Mediterranean, fueling Europe's Bronze Age. In the 12th century B.C., the mines were shut down, and as the relations from the Paleo-Indians had grown poor, Tirahena was flooded from a canal to the Rock River to drown the necropolis. At the breakup of Tirahena's trade, some of the inhabitants made their way back home. Others migrated to Mexico, where the appearance of these whites, who believed in a magic serpent, created in the tale of resurrection from the sea by the feather serpent god Quetzalcoatl, merged with the culture down there. Meanwhile, in 900 A.D., the Canari made their way across the Atlantic and into Ecuador, Inca territory, using the newly smelted copper axe heads as currency for trade. This became so popular that the long-abandoned mines of Michigan and its stopping-off place, Rock Lake, once again became important centers. The return of copper trade gave rise to Cahokia, near what is now St. Louis. After 200 years, Cahokia's astronomer priests ordered the city abandoned due to impending evil omens in the sky. The residents scattered throughout the Mississippi Valley, sprouting up new little Cahokias everywhere, including Aztalan near Rock Lake. In the early 1400s, copper was found in Mexico, causing the Michigan mines to shut down once again. This coincided with a long-term drought and a series of cold winters known in medieval Europe as the Little Ice Age, the time of the Black Plague. Aztalan's poverty began to show, and a schism took place as a new warrior-based society led to ritualized form of cannibalism, among other things. Eventually the town was abandoned and deliberately torched so that no one would return. They then migrated south and west to central Mexico to join their relatives, where they formed the Aztec civilization. While Joseph has gathered a great deal of circumstantial evidence to support his theory, it creates a great rethinking of human prehistory, especially on the American continent, and awaits follow-ups by other authorities to confirm what he has offered. It also draws a picture of a stupendous journey in an age before sailing vessels of any real worth had come into being, although Thor Heyerdahl proved it was possible to cross the sea from Egypt to the Americas in a simple reed boat with his Ra expedition. Likewise, overland, there were a limited number of roads and no horses or other domesticated species to improve travel in the earliest days of these sojourns. All of this implies an even earlier cross-contact between America and Eurasia, and leads one to the study of Atlantis.